Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, ladies and gentlemen. Liverpool have a massive task on their hands. They've got 3 out-of-contract superstars that potentially need replacing. Coming up on today's show, which former Premier League star could step into the breach to replace Mo Salah?
Just the magic that he provides. I think that's the thing that really sticks out.
Is there a right-back out there that could take over from Trent? And I've gone with a 25-year-old Premier League option. And I think it's fairly punchy. And finally, we find the perfect alternative to Virgil van Dijk.
Again, would cost an awful lot of money, but I think it would be, 90, 100 million pounds. Very, very well spent.
Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody. Joining myself and Michael McCubbin today, it's returning star of the Lowdown, Mr. Pete Smith. How you doing, Pete?
Welcome back. Yeah, thank you very much for having me back.
Great to have you.
Absolute pleasure. So last time I was Dan Ashworth. Now I'm Richard Hughes, Liverpool sporting director. Building up quite a good CV, aren't I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I had some good gardening leave in between as well.
Yeah, you crossed the divide. Very
yeah, no loyalty.
It won't be so popular at Anfield, but he did such a good job as sporting director at Man United in our picking the perfect signings for Ruben Amorim that today we brought him back as the sporting director of Liverpool to potentially find the replacements or have ultimate say on the replacements for these 3 out-of-contract superstars. Because, Mikey, there is a situation developing at Anfield where 3 of their top 4 players, maybe if you include Alisson in that, comfortably in the top 4, I'd say, of their best players, they're all out of contract at the same time. It's huge. Yeah,
it's massive. And it's, it's a narrative that's only becoming more and more prevalent as the season goes on. This was something that was looked at in the summer. This was actually something that was seen as a bit of a, misstep by, Jurgen Klopp in the last 2 years of his contract, wasn't it? The fact that, Van Dijk and Salah and Trent were, not being tied down to new deals. We saw, at the end of summer 2023, all that pressure from the Saudi Pro League over, offers for Salah. And that was, that really left the club with a decision to make. And, almost 18 months on, and Salah's contract, still hasn't been resolved. Obviously, we heard his comments on the weekend, which, riled up Jamie Carragher in particular. But I think, if what the player says is true, then you kind of can't blame him for saying what he said. This is, the greatest goal scorer in Liverpool's Premier League history. I think he is probably in the top 3 or 4 best goal scorers, in my opinion, in Premier League history, full stop. It's got to this stage of the season. He is so important to this club. And yet, if there hasn't been a contract offer at all, then I think that is, a little bit troubling, I would say. I know there's been a lot of focus on, settling in Arne Slot and making sure that he's comfortable with the squad that he has. And, they've done an amazing job behind the scenes there, clearly, given how comfortable Arne Slot is and the way that he's got his team playing. But yeah, Mo Salah's been such a big part of that. As for the other 2, I guess it's been a little bit quieter, but Trent Alexander-Arnold's, actually on Sky Sports said that, he would choose a Ballon d'Or over Liverpool captaincy effectively, which again, got a lot of speculation going over that. So yeah, there is tons of speculation over these 3 players. But I guess the advantage that Liverpool have is that, they are in a very powerful position at the moment, top of the Premier League. They've got a pretty settled team. They've got money as well to spend on replacements should they need to replace them, but it is of course like a massive task.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Pete, if you want to set any parameters on budget, I think we should probably just go for dream signings, but what's clear is that to replace these 3 players would take an enormous amount of money, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and of course, because they're out of contract, they're leaving for free basically at the end of the season, aren't they? It's not like you're getting 50, 60, 70 million pounds for these fantastic players who on a normal situation would be commanding huge fees, even at the ages that Salah and Van Dijk are at. I mean, certainly Trent Alexander-Arnold, what would he go for on the market if he had 2 or 3 years left on his contract? And that's a great point you make about Jurgen Klopp in terms of, did Liverpool miss a trick at this situation? Obviously, there's been lots of turnover, hasn't there, in the backroom staff and that
4
board
different sporting
level.
directors in the last 2 years.
So, somewhere along the way, the ball's been dropped, haven't they? But, if I was sporting director, you'd be giving Mo his dough, be paying Trent his rent. I wouldn't be letting Van Dijk get on his bike, that's for sure.
Very good. What a start.
Keep them locked in at Liverpool, absolutely. But, they're going to be incredibly hard to replace, all three of them. Even if one was leaving, you'd be thinking this could give Liverpool a bit of a wobble. But you see how well they performed this season. We've been talking about Salah on the football show on Sky Sports News. Second to Haaland for goals scored. Second to Saka for assists so far this season. Most touches in the box, like he is most seasons. Still such a threat. We saw him take off his shirt, didn't we, at Southampton. He's looking all right at 32. No real sign of decline. Trent Alexander-Arnold, such a unique player as well. How would you even go about replacing him? Or would you look for a completely different type of right back if you were having to replace him? And then Van Dijk, I think, you can find good centre backs, but can you find leaders and players who've got that aura and authority? I remember being up at the training ground before interviewing Klopp, when you're waiting around, Van Dijk strolling through the reception, and it's a really friendly club actually. Like, everyone there will say hello to you as you go in, whether it's a first teamer or a youth team player or a coach or a staff member. And Van Dijk, he comes in, hello everyone, good morning. But he's got this presence about him and that leadership, and I don't think that's always easy to find right at that very top level.
Yeah, absolutely, especially given the calibre of leaders they've lost in recent seasons. Henderson, Milner leaving, players like that, players that were so important to every success that they've had, and all these three players have been absolutely vital to it. So let's get straight into our dream replacements for these players. We'll carry on discussing their importance and relative strengths, and there aren't really weaknesses of these players, but as we continue on the episode. But Mikey, let's kick off with Mo Salah. He feels like the hottest topic of the week, let's say, given that interview, given the reaction from Jamie Carragher on Monday Night Football. The floor is yours. Who do you want to suggest to replace Mo Salah? Good luck. Okay,
so I do have what I think is a good suggestion here. But first off, you talk about the determination to keep them all at the club if you're a sporting director, which you are, of course. Sorry, but I did want to ask with Mo Salah, because I think it is a particularly pertinent question with Mo Salah, more so than with Van Dijk. I feel, even though they're both very much into their 30s now, but with Mo Salah, what is too much of a high price to pay for him? Like, what are you thinking in terms of what should Liverpool be offering him, basically, in terms of a contract extension? Should they be going more than 2 years? Should they be going over £350,000 a week? Because obviously Mo Salah's still at the top of his game, arguably the best player in the Premier League this season, but we have seen it in the past, stars of teams given big contracts and then around kind of a year or two later, or very soon after, we suddenly see quite a big decline. That isn't necessarily going to happen with Salah.
Contracts in the past, though.
He has, but
are you specifically thinking someone like Aubameyang?
Aubameyang springs to mind. I think someone who still seemed was almost at his peak at Arsenal when he got given that contract and dropped off quite a lot. Again, not saying that will happen with Salah, but I do feel like there's clearly some thinking at Liverpool that maybe his time will come.
I mean, Casemiro is another one that jumped straight to mind. Like, the length of contract that Man United gave him just felt way too long at the time. The wages just felt huge, and it just felt like, is this really a bargain deal for you when you think about you're not going to get anything at the end of his contract in terms of selling him on, are you? I've done a piece for the website which goes out this week, asking where Salah would rank among the best Premier League players. And as part of that, we spoke to Jamie Carragher. He reckons that, as well as this season, you get another 2 seasons out of Salah at the top level. So another 2 years from the end of his contract. So if you're saying, would you offer him a longer deal than 2 years? And Carragher felt that the sticking point would probably be not on how much money he's getting paid, but how long that contract could be. So he's 32, right? We're looking at players now like Lewandowski at 36, still scoring goals in the Champions League. We know what shape Ronaldo's still in, even though he's still playing out in Saudi. Harry Kane has spoken about wanting to play towards 40 as well. So if you look at those ages and Salah's age now, you'd think, well, another 2 seasons, is that just a minimum of what he could do at the top level? Has this talk of him going to Saudi and effectively, kicking back a little bit, come way too soon for him? Because we mentioned his physique, we mentioned his numbers, how fit he is, and how he continues to be a big game impactor in the Premier League. I don't think there's any sign of a dip at the moment in terms of his performances. So it's a tricky question for Liverpool's sporting director and those people to answer, is to try and predict when that fall off would come. But I don't think there's any evidence that it's going to be imminent, and that if you gave him a 3-year deal, a year in, you'd suddenly be thinking, oh my God, we got lumbered with this player that we can't do anything with, and we're paying him huge money. I think he's still going to be an important player for Liverpool for the next 2-3 years if he stays there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I think his consistency across the last few years is just mad, isn't it? I think the least goals he scored in a Premier League season is 18. I mean, just like he is outrageous, and I think people kind of almost underrate him in some ways. I saw some debate online. I think it was last week. Some people saying that David Beckham would make an all-time Premier League 11 ahead of him, and yeah, just there's no debate there, surely. Like, I mean, Salah is
Lowdown, yes, put him in his place.
Yeah, sure. Oh, it was Neve, wasn't it? Yeah, like, I mean, Salah is I think it will only be in a few years that, especially like non-Liverpool fans, will actually come to see. Like, I can only really think of Thierry Henry as someone who consistently scored so many goals season on season in the Prem.
So in doing this piece, I think Thierry Henry is probably the name that keeps coming up as like, this is the player that people would say is the best Premier League player. So if Salah gets 20 goals this season, he'll have had the same number of 20 goal seasons as Henry. And if he beats Haaland to the Golden Boot, he'd have had the same number of Golden Boots as Henry. And if Liverpool win the title, he'd have had the same number of Premier League titles as Thierry Henry. So,
Pete, what are you saying here?
Well, no, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it.
We're bringing back Thierry. That's what we're doing.
We hear about recency bias, don't we? And we talk about, this player right now is, he's the best player I've ever seen. I think there's almost a little bit of, that noughties era is really locked in, isn't it, as an iconic era, fantastic players wherever you looked. And I think that is true to quite a big extent. But should it be true to the extent that those players are completely untouchable when you see someone like Salah putting up the numbers and career that he has?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a lot of nostalgia, particularly online, about people remembering what football was like in the early 2000s. Like, a lot of games, I think mainly due to the standard of coaching throughout the league and the standard of player, obviously, with the influx of cash, particularly in the last 15 years compared to the rest of Europe. The standard of games is just chalk and cheese compared to what it was like even in the mid-noughties, really. And people always hark back to that as the glory days of the Premier League. You watch a game from 2002-03, West Ham Everton today, completely different kettle of fish, and that's not even a particularly good example. But anyway, enough about nostalgia. Mikey, let's have your first suggestion, Mo Salah replacement.
Sorry, yeah, I know you did call for that 5 minutes ago, but the replacement for Mo Salah, given everything that we've said, it's a really, really tough one. I think he is in terms of his pure output is almost irreplaceable. So I think Liverpool are going to need to spend potentially £100 million plus on whoever they get in. I think that's the price that you have to pay for a world-class goal-scoring winger who can also create, who has that bit of magic, and given that clubs know that you're going for the Salah replacement as well, they know how important this position is. And, Liverpool have spent a lot of money over the last few windows on forwards, but there's no one who really fits that mould on the right. I think, Harvey Elliott is probably, in many ways, the backup to Salah, and I think Harvey Elliott's a great player, but in the long term, is he actually going to be the one who's going to be taking on that role on the right wing? Yet to be convinced of that. I think in this Arne Slot system, and in Klopp's system as well, I think he was more suited to being in the midfield, with his kind of combative nature. He's not necessarily a natural goal scorer. I've gone for a player who actually recently left the Premier League, so it would be quite tough to get straight back to the Premier League next summer, but with £100 million on the table, I don't think it's completely impossible. And that's Bayern Munich's Michael Olise.
Wow.
Now, it feels it will be tough to get him out of Bayern, like, no doubt about it. He's well on his way to becoming a poster boy for the kind of new generation of this Bayern side, especially if Kompany can, translate this great domestic form into European competition as well. But equally, I think there are still question marks around Bayern long term. They've still got a relatively new hierarchy in place there in terms of the sporting director. Company still, over the course of 1 or 2 seasons is still unproven at the very top level. And we've seen a lot of managerial changes at Bayern over the years. So I still feel like there's the potential for there to be instability at Bayern over the next couple of years. And I wonder whether if Liverpool were to come and just say, oh yeah, we're just going to pay you £40 million more of what you paid last year for Olise, maybe it's too good an offer to refuse, especially given the fact that they're still pretty well stocked on the wings, even though I think Olise is the preeminent force there, or will be in the next year or two. But I just think in terms of what he offers, I don't think there are many better Salah replacements out there. He's only 22 years old. His expected goals and assists per 90 last year for Palace were absolutely outrageous. I think he was running at 0.8, which is kind of pushing on Salah levels. Salah generally averages around 1 a game, which is absolutely insane. But like Olise is right up there in terms of young attackers, and for a Palace side, which for a lot of last season were really, really poor going forward. We're seeing it now, with Glasner's Crystal Palace. I think a lot of praise was heaped on Glasner at the end of last season, when in fact it was kind of just the fact that he had Olise and Eze fit that they looked so good going forward. And they've really, really missed him this season. Like the downgrade in that position is it's so stark. But yeah, his productivity actually at Bayern is slightly down in that sense in terms of the underlying numbers. But when we look at his numbers generally across the last few seasons, it's pretty mad. Like, so in 2022-23, 2 goals and 11 assists for Palace in what was an injury hit season. Again, last season, another injury hit campaign, and he scored 10 goals and got 6 assists. This year, already in the Bundesliga, 5 goals and 2 assists. He's been creating over 2 chances a game across the last 3 seasons. Over the last 2 seasons, he's averaging between 3.4 and 4 shots a game. Like really, really elite numbers. And away from the numbers, just the magic that he provides. I think that's the thing that really sticks out. Like the range of goals that he can score, the 25-yard screamers, the kind of Messi-esque curlers from the edge of the box, arriving late at the back post to volley it in. Like his range of goals last season, I just thought was really, really telling. And yes, specifically that ability to like cut in on the kind of corner of the box and then loop a ball into the top corner. Very, very Salah-esque. And I think, yeah, he's just someone who could just slot into that Liverpool team very, very quickly and become the star.
Yeah, and he's got the mentality as well, hasn't he, mate? He's got this confidence, this self-belief in him. Not even celebrating goals. I remember that last season. He has just got this fantastic composure about him, but his skill is just wonderful. You'd almost have to sign Eze as well, wouldn't you? You'd get those two back together and united. Because watching them last season was just... It was like Harlem Globetrotters stuff at times, wasn't it? Knocking the ball around, little interchanges of position or bouncing the ball off each other. And as you said, like that purple patch under Glasner at the end of last season, I was so confident and full of belief. And that's what those 2 players gave them. And Elise, I think you could tell, 22, you say he's 22, that's unbelievable. He's so young, so much more room to improve and to keep going and to show himself over the next few seasons. Yeah, I think it's a great shout. I think the other thing about Salah that we don't talk about enough is his creativity and his assists, which he's really added in the last number of seasons. And Olise certainly would bring that, wouldn't he? Talking about him coming in on his left foot from that right wing, but as well as looking for that top corner, he can quite often pick a little pass through the box as well, can't he? So, I think that's good. The only thing I would say, those injury hit seasons you mentioned, and that was always the frustration, well, certainly for Palace, the frustration they couldn't get Eze and Olise on the pitch together often enough because both of them would be in and out of the treatment room. So I guess that would be a little concern.
Yeah, for sure. I guess this will be interesting if he can last this season at Bayern without any major injuries. Then hopefully that's an indication that those days are behind him. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good pitch. I think it's a year too late, though, is what I would say. I can't see Bayern Munich selling Olise to Liverpool in the summer, unless it's a ridiculous sum, which Mikey did say that they might well have to offer. But This is a thankless task, isn't it? You know, Mo Salah has played at least 44 games every season. He scored at least 25 goals every season. There's no one really like him in world football in that right wing position. I think the players that you'd most want to sign are obviously the likes of Saka, the likes of Yamal, but they're not leaving. I did think about Olise, and I just thought, I can't see Bayern selling him this summer. And then the players that are being linked at the moment, the likes of Antoine Semenyo at Bournemouth, Brian Mbeumo at Brentford, these are really promising players, but this is a huge task.
They're just not quite that level. And they're also not particularly young as well. I think that's the thing. It's like, if Semenyo was at this level at like 21 years of age, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. If Mbeumo was like putting up these numbers at around that age as well, and I know they're playing for like much lesser teams than Liverpool, but they're still playing in teams that kind of work for them. Because I had similar feelings, and it's just like, yeah, like fine, like Liverpool, it wouldn't be a terrible decision for Liverpool to go for them, but you're not replacing Salah then, are you? You're having to compensate elsewhere on the pitch. Like Luis Diaz is going to have to become the star of that forward line, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I factored that in, and I kind of wanted someone with a big club experience, with Champions League experience as well, and I've gone big. I'm going for Rodrygo of Real Madrid.
Oh, wow. Chat.
Just 23. He's only 24 in January. And look, he was signed as such a young star. I think he was only 17, 18. And it's not been difficult for him, but he's been quite clearly in Vinicius Jr.'s shadow. Vinicius Jr. has become probably the best player in the world, at least in the top 3 best players in the world on the basis of last season. It was Rodri, but he was in the conversation, wasn't he? And he has been when he's been fit for the last couple of years. He's outshining Mbappe at Real Madrid right now. And Rodrygo, in contrast, had a slow start at Real Madrid, like Vinicius Jr., but hasn't quite kicked on to the same extent. You know, he only scored 18 goals in his first 3 seasons at Real Madrid. But in the last 2, so in the last 108 games he's played for Real Madrid, 56 goals and assists, which is really pretty promising. And this is a player that is slightly different to Salah in lots of ways. And I think Salah this year is being used as even more so of a last line attacker, like just getting on the end of these often quite direct play from slot when needed, really. And Salah is the king of making those runs in behind. He's so calm in front of goal. But in terms of passes per game, progressive passes, progressive carries, being generally involved in play, Rodrygo actually outshines Salah on most of those facets. Now, what he can't hold a candle to is Salah's injury record. You know, he's never started more than 28 league games in a season, but he's done around 25 to 28 3 times. So he's not permanently injured, but he's had more injury issues than Salah. And he hasn't had that Salah-esque breakout campaign yet. But I think in the last 2 individual campaigns, 17 goals and then 19 goals, which is pretty impressive for a guy that's only turning 24 in January and hasn't necessarily been first name on the team sheet that whole time, playing for a side that in the last few years, since Benzema's departure, has been designed to get the best out of Vinicius Jr. rather than Rodrygo. And even this year, ranks 9th for league minutes this season. He's currently out injured, but could they get hold of him? Yeah, I think so. There's Arda Güler there. There's Brahim Diaz still there. Vinicius Jr. is obviously there. Mbappe's still there. It feels like maybe if this Mbappe central striking role doesn't really work out, he'll be shifted to the right-hand side. Maybe they'll look at another 9 in the coming seasons. Maybe they'll put Jude Bellingham back in that false sort of 9 position. So Rodrygo does feel like he's a little bit more gettable than Michael Olise, I'd say, right now as well. He does still have a contract until 2028. And I think he would cost about £80 million to start with, maybe even a touch more.
At least.
Maybe even a touch more. But I think he's less
of
a key part of Real Madrid's long-term strategy than Michael Olise is, who feels like he's Kane's kind of right-hand man at the moment. With Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry and Koeman, probably one of them feels like they're going to be sold this summer. They're linked with Florian Wirtz as well. It feels like Rodrygo is more gettable.
Rafinha's another option.
Rafinha is another option. He's having such a good season. Barcelona aren't getting rid of him. So, Richard, you've got a big decision to make. Olise or Rodrygo?
Oh, that's good.
I thought you'd just actually forgotten Pete's
name.
For a second, I was like, we're in character. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm in character. You keep saying it like he's Olise, he's not gettable. You said Alphonso Davies wasn't gettable the last time on this show. And ever since that show, I feel like I've seen newspaper report after newspaper report that he's going to come to Man United.
That's our star influence. Like, people just watch the Lowdown and take it verbatim. Yeah, I think, like, I must admit, like, I can see Dougie's thinking here with Rodrygo because of Mbappe coming in and just the amount of competition in that forward line. But it's just like Real Madrid just very, very rarely let those kind of stars go so young. And I think Rodrygo's also a really good shout, but I 80 million at the very least. I think Rodrygo would also, like, Real would charge 100 million for him for sure. I think
He's fighting back.
I'm just saying, like, I think if it's down to finances, I think they're both gonna would be sold.
Plus,
for,
we were
for the
kind of
same
leaving
amount.
our wallets at the door. These are dream replacements.
It's true.
Pete,
Yeah,
you've got to make a call.
So just go on who you.
So who's the dream replacement then? I think for Liverpool. I think the other thing with this is, I know we'll come on to this, but who's going to be right back? So are we going to go for, you know, a real defensive-minded right back who's going to just let Olise do his thing, or are we going to have someone who's going to try and do a little bit themselves as well? And then you start seeing that real team ethic that Rodrygo's got, that hard running backwards that he does, the covering he does for the other attackers. Because I think that's a massive feature of why it worked so well for Real Madrid, particularly like last season. You know, get to Champions League final when you've got Vinicius doing his thing on one side, Rodrygo working hard and in tandem with Bellingham or whoever else it may be up front, and really buying into that team ethic. I think that's what I really like about Rodrygo. So if you're going to have, I think, modern day right back, and I don't know who you're going to pitch to me, I think they're probably going to try and do something on the ball rather than just sitting behind Olise and letting him do his thing, a bit like you know, whoever would be a right back at Crystal Palace over the last couple of seasons, Joel Ward.
Yeah,
just let him get on with it. So I think for that reason, and sort of thinking about building my team, I might be leaning towards Dougie and Rodrygo.
Wow, okay. Big call. 1-0. Rodrygo is in as the Salah replacement.
I might have the right back for you though, just saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
we'll
you did kind of
yeah.
tee that up, Pete/Richard, really nicely there to go into the right back area. Mike, you lost the first round, so do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. I think first of all with Trent, I do think, and I don't think this is a controversial statement to make, but despite the fact that he's much younger than Van Dijk and Salah, despite the fact that he's a Liverpool lad, despite the fact that he is arguably the most unique right back in world football, in some ways I think this is the easiest task, replacing Trent, because especially with a new system in place, and Trent, you know, when you look at his heat map in particular, you can really see that he is playing a more conventional role than he was under Jurgen Klopp. He's not inverting as much. He's doing more defensive work. I do think that actually, yeah, Trent is, you know, it is in many ways the most replaceable, in that you kind of don't need to replace him all that much. Like, Liverpool have a very, very promising young right back in Conor Bradley, waiting in the wings. You know, he's 21 years of age now, probably doesn't have quite as much experience as he would have done if someone like Trent wasn't, you know, taking up that space. But nevertheless, we certainly saw it kind of midway through last season just how effective Conor Bradley can be, and he's a very different kind of right back to Trent. A lot more of a traditional attacking fullback. But in many ways, you know, yeah, Liverpool kind of have their replacement there, and that has come into my thinking about. Were you about to say?
I was just going to say, I think I kind of agree with you that he might be the most replaceable, but I think he's almost the most upsetting to lose, given his ties coming through the academy, given the fact he's kind of being, for want of a better word, sort of groomed to be future Liverpool captain, and his age as well. Like, if Salah and Van Dijk left this summer, I think most Liverpool fans would kind of be like, look, we got them into their 30s. They won everything there was to win here. We kind of maximised everything out of them. And look, Salah and Van Dijk probably have more years at the top, but they don't have as many years at the top as Trent Alexander-Arnold does. And you can imagine if Trent goes to Real Madrid, which feels like the most likely destination for him just cementing his place as the outstanding right back in the game, where there has been sort of debate about that over the last few years due to quite outdated, I think, criticisms of his defending, which now I just don't think really wash. I think he's a very solid defender, particularly under Slot this season. I think you've seen that. So I do see your point that he might be more replaceable, but I think it will hurt a lot if he was to go.
Oh, big time. It's the one that I think that it's definitely the ones that will hurt Liverpool fans the most. Like they yeah, like you say, they can you know, bid farewell to Van Dijk and Salah with Trent. You know, there is a feeling now, especially like with, you know, still no contract agreed, that, well, if he wants to go, then he should just go. Like he shouldn't play for the club if he doesn't want to.
I think this is the thing, isn't it? You see a homegrown player come through like that, local lad, and you think, oh, he's one of us. He's like a fan playing for the club, which he is. But there's been a lot of lines from Michael Owen in the press this week about not feeling loved at Liverpool because he obviously left and ultimately ended up playing for Man United.
Yeah, I didn't find it particularly surprising.
Yeah, you can't go and play for Man United.
You kind of left in your prime and then went and joined Man United afterwards. That is a big shock.
But it just shows the pool of Real Madrid, doesn't it? That even these real homegrown Liverpool players who love the club, when Real Madrid come knocking, it's just this huge pool, isn't it? And I think we're seeing it again now with Trent, that he's achieved what he's needed to achieve at Liverpool, I guess, but there's so much more he could do, and he could have his whole career there like Gerrard and Carragher. But I guess neither of them. Well, I wonder did Gerrard have serious offers from Real Madrid?
I think there was interest at various points. I think he was closest to joining Chelsea around the sort of 2005 time, wasn't it? Actually, maybe it was even 2006, because I think he always said that he played quite poorly at the 2000s.
No, it was 2005, because it was after he'd won the Champions League, and I do wonder whether if Liverpool hadn't won the Champions League that season, whether Steven Gerrard would have just been like, no, I'm staying at Liverpool. I do kind of feel like having just won something in such a style, it was almost like this would be the time to leave, and he clearly was interested in that Chelsea move. Wasn't
it could work both ways. So maybe he thought, I've just won something, I can't possibly leave now, having played such a crucial role in their comeback in the final.
But I do think like the fact that Liverpool didn't go on to win a Premier League title helped cement him at the club. Like he was so keen to win that Premier League in the end, wasn't he? And like you say, like Trent's done that. There's less of that pressure to stay. Like he has given so much to the club already, at least in terms of like silverware. So he's kind of got the privilege of being like, I can make a career decision now. And how many times do you have such an easy opportunity to go to Real Madrid? Like you can go there for free, pick up a big wage packet, and Real Madrid, would happily pick you up at this moment in time when you're in your peak years or approaching your peak years. Trent may only have, this may be Trent's only chance to move to Real Madrid. And
he might be on an open top bus parade. Liverpool just won the title.
Exactly.
Thinking, what have I done? But,
he might well be.
Tough calls,
Absolutely.
So shall I go into my replacement?
Dive in.
I'll go straight for it. So considering that, and my faith in Connor Bradley, and also the fact that there is a bit of a dearth of actual gettable, top quality young right backs out there at the moment. My kind of outstanding candidates. Because I know who Dougie's gone for, and he has gone for a real outstanding candidate, I must admit.
Conceding defeat already.
Well, no, because I've got a good one, just in a different mould. The kind of two that really stood out to me actually are in the Premier League, and that's Malo Gusto at Chelsea and Tino Livramento at Newcastle. Tino Livramento, of course, big injury issues, but I think he has been one of the brighter sparks in this Newcastle team this season. He looks like he's getting back to the kind of player that we saw at Southampton, but Newcastle paid quite a lot of money for him, and I just don't see Liverpool paying £60 million plus for a Trent replacement right now, given that, like I say, I don't think it's not like Van Dijk and Salah where you have to spend a huge amount to get someone in who's going to be able to replicate their effect on the team. Yeah,
we're not talking about it so much on this show, but they've got a bit issue at left back as well, right? So they've got to decide once Robertson is done whether Tsimikas is going to be a long-term option there. They're going to need a left back basically, I think, next summer.
Potentially.
So could you sign a player like Tino Livramento who can play on both sides? And you think, well, when Bradley's in form and fit and flying, we can have him at the right back and we can play Tino on the left, or we can move Tino onto the right back position when we need him there.
It's a very good point, and it's not something that I considered massively before, and now I'm regretting not going for Tino Livramento. And Malo Gusto as well has played at left back as well, and of course is good at inverting. But again, I just thought like Chelsea just aren't going to sell him. There's just no chance Chelsea are selling him to a Premier League rival. He's only 21. They got him on such a good deal. You're selling to a direct rival when you're on the up yourselves. Big question marks over Reece James's ability long term to be able to play football at this point. Is sadly, like Malo Gusto, I think is at Chelsea for the next few years at least. But I've actually gone for Joshua Kimmich. I've gone completely the other end of the spectrum. I just think out of contract at Bayern Munich at the end of this season,
company's going to absolutely hate you.
He is, I'm raiding Bayern a little bit. It wasn't my initial plan, but I just think he's currently in talks with Bayern, but he's representing himself in these talks. He's 29 years old. If there's a time for him, this is his last chance to get another big move, essentially. And I think, Bayern are also, entering a new era as well. And I think just think Kimmich would be a great fit at Liverpool, given where they are at right now. I think, they're blooding a lot of new players, young players, especially in the midfield with Gravenberch and Curtis Jones. You've got, a young right back there in Conor Bradley who needs, he's going to be under big pressure to take the reins from Trent Alexander-Arnold. Kimmich, I think, could just be an absolute revelation in the last kind of 2-3 years of his at the peak of his powers. He's played about a third of his minutes across his career at club level at right back. He still plays right back for Germany. There was a point where he was really the best right back in world football and then quickly became kind of the best defensive midfielder in world football. His passing numbers this year are ridiculous. So in that sense, you've got quite a nice bridge between Trent and Conor Bradley there. You've got Kimmich, as right backs go, is probably the most similar to Trent at the top level, and that, he is a pass master. He's a chance creator. He can move the ball between the lines really, really nicely. He's just such a natural footballer. And his pass numbers this year under Kompany, are just absolutely off the scale. I think no one's made more passes than him in Europe's top 5 leagues this season. And that's partly down to, Kompany's system. But, as we see, Slot loves the build up from the back. And I think, he just has a lot to offer there, especially, if they need cover in midfield as well. So, I'm thinking Kimmich comes in next summer. You get 2 to 3 years out of him. And by the time that's up, Conor Bradley is very much firmly number one choice at right back, and 24, 25 years old at the peak of his powers. I think it's a match made in heaven.
29. I thought you were going to say he was a bit older than that. It feels like he's been on the scene for so long, doesn't it? But even at 29,
for free.
For free, yeah. What would his wages be? Not as extortionate, maybe, but on a free transfer, you can name your price.
You can. But I do feel like Kimmich. I can't see him going to Liverpool and being like, you've got to pay me like crazy money. Like, Liverpool have a pretty good wage structure in place. They can probably still, even within that wage structure, potentially offer him a little bit of an increase on what he's on at Bayern. I can't remember what he's on at Bayern off the top of my head. But it's still Premier League wages, still, that chance to play in the Premier League as well. I think it would be a tantalising prospect.
It is a good shout. The thing with Kimmich at right back is I think he wants to play in midfield. I think that was one of the reasons that he kind of fell out with Tuchel, that he wanted to play in midfield. Like, this year under Kompany, he's playing a lot more in midfield than at right back. And I do like the fact that he can do both, because actually Endo doesn't feel like he's really in favour with Slot at all. No. McAllister, I think, has proven that whilst he was very competent as a 6 last year, he's so much better as an 8 / a kind of 10 kind of link player. I think Alexis McAllister is really underrated, to be totally honest. So I like the fact that Kimmich could cover there, and also I think if you lose the 24-25 version of Trent Alexander-Arnold, which isn't pushing up as far forward, there's almost no difference with Kimmich, but I think he just wants to play in midfield. So I've gone for a more classic right back, and I did consider Achraf Hakimi, but he's just signed a new deal with PSG. Also very different from what Trent is doing in this current system, like much more of a flyer. Jeremy Frimpong will be linked, but he's really a wing back / winger, really. I think he lines up in a back 5 in all but on the team sheet, really. In actual reality, he's much more of a winger. I also thought about Lucharel Gertruida at RB Leipzig, who worked under Arne Slot at Feyenoord last year, but he's just joined RB Leipzig. Probably needs another year there before he's ready for a big move. So instead I went Premier League, and I've gone with a 25-year-old Premier League option, and I think it's fairly punchy, but I think Pedro Porro could do a really good job for Liverpool. And look, Daniel Levy does not like selling anyone, particularly players that he wants at the club. He doesn't like selling to Premier League rivals. I think it would cost a lot of money, given his age. But I think he's kind of gone under the radar ever since he joined Spurs. I think for a player that had no Premier League experience but had spent time in England with Man City, he's kind of not taken a backward step since he joined, really. And yes, a bit of last year, he was kind of in and out the side with Emerson Royale. There was a few injury issues. But when he's fit and available, I think he's remarkable. And look, Trent is kind of a freak from right back. There's been no right back in Premier League history that's ever put up the creative numbers that he has. You know, prior to last year, he'd averaged over 7 assists in the league, or at least 7 assists in the league for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Like ever since his breakthrough in 2017-18 was the first year where he put up serious numbers. That's amazing consistency from a right back. But Pedro Porro, in terms of his creative numbers, isn't actually that far behind. So this year, Trent is at 0.28 expected assists per 90. Porro's at 0.19. So an assist every 5 games on average if he continues to operate at that level. His shot creating actions are at 3.5. Trent's are at 4.5. And yes, he might not be the sort of Trent, Kevin De Bruyne, amazing creative talent in terms of his passing from wide, but he does pick up brilliant attacking positions, I think, and he's got a really good shot on him, Pedro Porro. I think his shooting in and around the box is really underrated, and the amount of sort of control and emphasis that Postecoglou puts on his wing-backs, Dougie and Porro, to really get up into those really attacking inverted areas and create damage, I think is something that Slot would really value as well, particularly with, I don't want to hammer him too much, but I don't think Dominic Szoboszlai is really playing at his best this year. Like having another creative force in and around those areas might just ease the burden on a potential Salah-less Liverpool as well. So I think Pedro Porro is potentially gettable. I think Daniel Levy would sell for a considerable fee. I can imagine it being £60 million plus. I would have thought maybe even more. His contract's until 2028, but he's 25. He's, you know, got his prime ahead of him. Kimmich is in his prime, coming out of his prime beforehand. Pete, you got a decision to make.
Yeah, tricky one. You know, for Pedro Porro, definitely improved substantially, I think, at Tottenham. I remember that first season he came in, there was some shocking moments defensively, particularly running back towards his own goal, where, you know, this is sort of the times when Tottenham getting bashed up by Newcastle at St James's Park. Do you remember that game? They conceded loads early on, and some of his defending there was just shocking. But I think he has moved some of those issues out of his game and improved defensively. But certainly under Ange Postecoglou, it's about what he can do going forwards. And you mentioned his shooting. He seems to arrive in good positions as well to get those shots and pick up the loose balls around the box and fire off that, you know, that fierce right foot shot that's got him a few goals, isn't it, over the last couple of seasons. I think in terms of, you know, building up, does he have... He's definitely been asked to do that more at Tottenham, isn't he, in terms of stepping in and coming into midfield. Does he have that poise on the ball that you'd want?
He's not Kimmich levels at it. No. I think that's fair to say.
No, and I just wonder, you know, you mentioned about the scrutiny on Trent's defending. I wonder if, you know, in these big games, you know, Liverpool going for titles, going for Champions Leagues, whether he might just come a little bit unstuck there. Yeah, I'm a little bit... unconvinced, I still feel, for Porro. I feel he's good at Tottenham at the moment, but is he a player where you'd go, oh, we just lost Trent, this is the man we want to go and get?
Okay.
I'm a little bit reserved about Kimmich as well, because I feel like, you know, signing a 29-year-old who's not played in the Premier League before,
it's not the most Liverpool move.
It doesn't feel like a great Liverpool move, but I think
it's time to go with the Maverick choice here for Liverpool,
and also to set up a grandstand finish to this show. I think maybe try and go.
He's always thinking about the show. That is a true sporting director.
Yeah, purely scripted.
Love it.
I think you made the right choice. I really think you made the right choice.
I think Mikey made an excellent pitch, and I like the fact he can cover in midfield as well. So far we signed Rodrygo and Kimmich. What a summer this is turning out for Liverpool. The final one is Van Dijk, replacing Van Dijk. Now, we've done a few episodes of the Lowdown now. We've done a few episodes that have mentioned kind of centre-backs that could replace superstars. And at various points over the last year, we've talked about the need to think about Van Dijk's replacement. At the moment, it feels kind of unthinkable because Mikey said earlier that Salah's probably been the best player in the Premier League so far this season. He's certainly right up there. But I think Van Dijk's in the conversation too. And, you know, probably Van Dijk, Cole Palmer, Salah probably feels like the outstanding candidates right now. Apologies if I'm forgetting anyone. Maybe Moises Caicedo is an outside shout as well. But we have talked about a number of centre-backs, well, I feel like I have, that could replace Van Dijk going forward. I think I talked about Nico Schlotterbeck in previous episodes at Borussia Dortmund. I've talked about David Hansko, who's worked under Arne Slot at Feyenoord. My next shout isn't of the Rodrygo Kimmich ilk, but I think he's a really, really promising player that's coming off a phenomenal season last year, and that's Edmond Tapsoba at Bayer Leverkusen. He's now signed in January 2020 from Vitória de Guimarães, the Portuguese side, by Bayer Leverkusen, around 18 million euros. And what a signing that has proven to be. Last year, he made 46 appearances as Leverkusen set a record for the most games unbeaten in European football history. I think it's easily forgotten because they have dropped off this year. Just how crazy an achievement that was. And I know it was in the Europa League, it wasn't in the Champions League.
They didn't even get Team of the Year at the Ballon d'Or, did they?
That was a shocker. The fact Xabi Alonso didn't win Coach of the Year as well, that really, really annoyed me. But that was a phenomenal season. And Tapsoba, alongside Jonathan Tah and Kosunu or Stanisic on the right-hand side, but he was, alongside Tah, the real rock of that defence. And I think the fact he can play on the left side of defence, as he has done in most regularly in the back three, but he's also played as a right-sided centre-back in the past as well. He can play on either side. He is right-footed but comfortable in left channels where Van Dijk plays. He's 25 years old. He feels like he's coming into his prime. And his passing numbers are remarkable, which I think is probably what we're looking for this Van Dijk replacement, because Konate's so physical, very good in wide channels, very good aerially as well, but maybe not as good on the ball as Van Dijk. And, Van Dijk's probably the best centre-back in the world, so that's no slight against Konate. But Tapsoba is almost up there, playing in a slightly lesser standard than Van Dijk, but still his passing numbers are absolutely remarkable. So this season, 6.4 progressive passes, Van Dijk's at 5.9. He also carries the ball a lot further forward than Van Dijk. Van Dijk does so 0.7 times per 90, Tapsoba at 1.9. His tackle success rate's above Van Dijk this season. His aerial dual win rate is roughly the same. And in terms of progressive passes completed in Europe, he's 7th among centre-backs, and that's with Akanji's up there, Inigo Martinez is up there, players like that who are having great seasons, less so Akanji in the last few weeks, but Inigo Martinez I think has been really, really underrated. And his passes into the final third, 13th in the entirety of Europe, and that includes midfielders like Xhaka, and previously we've seen players like Rodri dominate that. So this is really the best passes in the world. Tapsoba fares very well against them, let alone centre-backs. So he might not be the most glamorous option, but it feels like Leverkusen are kind of coming towards the end of a cycle. I think Xabi Alonso will in all likelihood leave this summer. I think there's a very good chance Florian Wirtz leaves this summer as well. Tapsoba, they won't want to lose him and Jonathan Tah, who feels likely to leave. But I think Tapsoba is gettable. And I think he'd cost 55, 60 million pounds. They've generally sold their best players, Moussa Diaby a few years ago for around that fee. So bring him in. It's my call.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, it makes sense, as we know Liverpool are admirers of Xabi Alonso and what he's done there at Bayer Leverkusen. We know that for a fact, and it makes sense then to look at the players that really shaped that Leverkusen side last season and were integral to them, and think about what they could do now for your Liverpool team. Playing for Arne Slot and slightly different formations and slightly different approach, but the idea is the same, isn't it? And I think. That translation, I think, from Bundesliga to Premier League, in terms of like the intensity and the physicality, I think is fairly similar pathway, smooth pathway. Van de Ven, great example, yeah. So if you can defend well in that league, and clearly you can defend well if you can, was it 47 games unbeaten, you must have something about you. So I think it's great chance.
Thinking of Van de Ven, I actually thought about Van de Ven, but that injury record counted against him for me, and I didn't want too many Spurs fans being annoyed with me after I suggested Porro.
Yeah, like the Bayern fans. Luckily, there are probably less Bayern fans in the comments than Spurs fans, given the nature of this channel. But I've gone for, I think, the really good pitch on Tapsoba there. And in some ways maybe a little bit more of a Liverpool-y signing than who I'm going to suggest. But I do think, like we were saying earlier, Van Dijk is he's almost irreplaceable. And I think if you take him out of this team, as we've seen in seasons past when he's been injured, the effect is just catastrophic. It really is. Like you were saying earlier, Richard, like just, the aura that he has, the leadership, all of those things, plus his, of course, amazing physical and technical ability is, it's almost, unmatched among centre-backs in the world right now. But my suggestion is someone who, at the very least, has a very similar skill set to Van Dijk, and crucially has a number of years at the top level now and is still at a very good age, and that's Alessandro Bastoni at Inter. Now, he's 25 years old now, and if he were to move to Liverpool next summer, I think he would be around 6 months younger than Van Dijk was when he moved from Southampton, but with a ton more top-level experience than Van Dijk had at that age. He made his Serie A debut for Atalanta at 17. He's now got almost 200 Serie A appearances at the age of 25. He's been to Champions League finals and Europa League finals with Inter. Of course, was part of the Italy squad that won the Euros, even though he didn't really feature at the tournament so much. But similarly to Tapsoba, he plays in a high possession system on the left of a back three, and is a brilliant passer. His passing numbers are better than Van Dijk this season. He's putting up almost 7 progressive passes per 90 minutes. Van Dijk is down at 4.2. His long ball accuracy is up at 68%, which is really, really excellent. In seasons past, we've seen Van Dijk average around 75%. That's actually come down to 64% this season. And his his total number of completed long balls is just ridiculous. 82 so far this season, which is actually, it's only 5 fewer than David Raya has managed in total for Arsenal. And I think more than Jan Oblak at Atleti. So his passing stats speak for themselves. And what really sets him apart as well is is something that would be, something different from Van Dijk and almost an upgrade on what Van Dijk offers, is his ability to really push up the field and receive the ball, in the final third at points. When you look at his heat map, there's points where he's, almost playing in the left wing position, or at least receiving the ball there or making space there. And I think that's a really notable part of his game. And of course, that might be just a function of the system that he's playing in. Like Simone Inzaghi's Inter dominate possession and, really stick out for their possession style in a way that I don't think any team does really in the Premier League. You've got a number of teams that the players, it's probably a bit more of a transitional league as well, the Premier League at this point, stylistically probably a bit more similar to the Bundesliga in that sense. Whereas in Italy, I think there are maybe a greater variety in styles of play, and so something like that with Bastoni probably sticks out a little bit more, and Slot would probably rein him in a little bit, but I think that's fine. He'd be playing in the back two as well, so I think he would, and despite playing on the left of a back three, I think he would be absolutely fine in the centre, especially with Konate being able to sweep up behind him when he makes those runs forward. Physically, absolutely there. Great presence in the air. Just a brilliant defender. He's very much the heir to Bonucci, isn't he? In that Italy setup. So I think Bastoni in that sense, again, would cost an awful lot of money, but I think it would be 90, 100 million pounds, very, very well spent.
Some similarities, I guess, to Calafiore as well, isn't there? In terms of moving forward down that left channel, having previously, are you a centre back? Are you a left back in a back four? Arsenal obviously enjoying having him in their team now. He's really stepped up, hasn't he, and really delivered on that promise. And Bastoni would be fascinating, especially if we've got Josh Kimmich, sitting in at right back, offering a little bit of cover for an adventurous left-sided centre-back. Dougie, this isn't going quite to plan for you, is it?
Oh dear. You're scaring me now, Pete.
I really did enjoy the Tapsoba pitch, but Bastoni is the
bigger names one out.
I think,
What a summer for Liverpool. Rodrygo, Kimmich and Bastoni.
Are they better off with those three players than with Salah, Trent?
It's a very good question. I don't think so, to be totally honest. I think
better the devil you know.
Yeah.
Better the devil you know for sure. Like the chances are, you look at major signings, £100 million signings, like how often do they go exactly to plan? Very, very rarely. They've got to adapt to a new system, a new country, a new coach. It never quite fits exactly how it's never going to be 100% accurate in all those facets.
But in the long term, right? Even though there's obviously massive pressure that comes with those, the £100 million price tag, but these are players. Rodrygo has held his own in an amazing Real Madrid team. Bastoni is, probably the best, certainly the best left-footed, left-sided centre back in world football. At some point it's kind of like, well, you've got to just go for the best. And I think, in maybe next season Liverpool wouldn't be better off because there'd be an adaptation period. But surely, in in 3 years' time, Liverpool would be much better off and would be, not regretting spending that money at all.
The difficulty is, I think, each of the signings we've kind of mentioned, well, Kimmich is a potential free, but the others, you're probably going towards £200 million, then the wages on top of that. Like, I think it probably makes financial sense. Like, if I had a crystal ball...
But then you're losing Salah's wages, you're losing Van Dijk's wages, and you're losing Trent. They're three of the most, highly paid players.
If I had a crystal ball, I would probably predict that of the three, Trent feels most likely to leave. And if Trent leaves, I wouldn't want to lose either of the other two at all. So for me, I'd kind of, pay their rent or whatever you said. Give them the dough. And
don't let Van Dijk get on the bike.
Well, exactly. You've got to keep him in. Lock up that bike. But guys, we will see. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating next 7 or so months for Liverpool. Not only do they look like clear favourites for the Premier League title and probably the Champions League right now too, although we are recording this prior to their game against Real Madrid. They've got this huge situation developing. Guys, what did you make of our suggestions for dream replacements? Before you get angry, the title was dream replacements. So we dreamt big. And they're three huge players. So what did you expect? Massive thanks to Pete Smith for restarting his role or retaking up his role as sporting director. Did you enjoy it, Pete?
Yeah, which club will I pop up at
next?
Well,
he's just handing in his notice left, right, centre in the Premier League. You are made for the role, very much so. Mikey, thank you very much as ever. Guys, let us know your thoughts about it. Like the video, subscribe to Sky Sports Premier League, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.